that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 445th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. He's always in the flesh, which is why he's able to come back week after week, because he stays in the flesh. Okay, every day I go to the internet and I look up the news, put together synopses of news about energy and climate change together.
A blog.
Together to
do a blog.
Yeah, with the links to those, and I put 10 to 15 together into a blog post, which goes up at my blog, geoharvey.com. You can go there and read the show, the articles that we're talking about, but you can also go down onto probably the same page that you're looking at on your computer or TV, and you can see a link there to get either the original, a link to the original site that Tom and I work with, or a download of the week's material from that site.
Well, this show is the best of the blog.
The best of the blog.
And some of the articles are well worth
absolutely
following up and reading yourself.
You know, maybe we should change it from Energy Week to Best of the Blog.
Well, there's one of them that's going to show up today that shall be, the author shall be unknown, shall be anonymous. But
the author shall be anonymous.
But it's a very good and in-depth article.
About
energy.
Oh, I see.
About
okay.
virtually all aspects of energy.
Okay, good.
And it's about the show.
Oh.
And, well, you wrote it.
I wrote it. I thought it was going to be anonymous. Well, I can tell you. All right, we'll get to it. It happens before the end. So
that's what I look like.
We should just start. And there is our first slide. This is a salt marsh.
That's what it looks like.
It
see
does.
how I can get it up there.
Which I got from Unsplash. And this is a BBC article.
Looks like a salt marsh to me.
Well, if it wasn't a salt marsh, it would be some other kind of marsh. But it's a marsh. And
I'll take your word for it.
Okay, BBC.
What am I trying to do here?
You're trying to read the title.
Coastal salt marsh, quote, engineered to fight climate change.
Yeah. Reflooding coastal wetlands.
Reflooding is the operative word here.
Absolutely. Could provide an opportunity to work with nature in quotes, and use sea level rise to fight climate change. Scientists say an ongoing study of a coastal marsh in Scotland that was restored in 2018 has shown the potential to lock carbon emissions into mud.
Into mud. Well, this picture isn't necessarily the one we're talking about, but this above-mentioned reserve that was restored in 2018,
yeah,
it is today indistinguishable from the salt marsh that's been here for hundreds of years.
Nature recovers very quickly given the opportunity.
It's allowing the sea to come back in.
Yeah.
Well, allowing the sea to come back in created habitat.
Yeah.
And an opportunity to store carbon in plants and soils.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty useful solution.
There's an interesting place that's not far from where I lived. I lived in Devon, and this is I can't remember. I think it's in Somerset, but it's Glastonbury, and there's a mountain there. It's a hill called Glastonbury Tor, and that area
Tor is a kind of ancient word for mountain, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that area was called the Isle of Avalon. And it's not even close to the sea. But in those days...
What's a different meaning of the word isle?
No. In the old days, the land was lower, and it has
actually... it was actually an isle.
That's right. And it has sprung up a little bit. And with sea level rise, it might become an island again, which would be much to the dismay of a number of people who live nearby.
Who live there.
But anyway.
Well, we can move along here. We got another
you wish.
picture coming up here. And
This is an interesting picture, and I want to bring to everybody's attention. This is a picture of interruptions of our electric power, and those dark areas at the bottom of every bar are the ones that did not involve major events. The other
kind of
ones,
normal.
yeah, and they're just basically the same from one year to the next. You know,
They seem to
poke
be,
along.
yeah.
The other ones, you know, it's like on the right side of the chart they're big, and on the left side they're small. I would say.
These are what they call major events.
Right.
Something happened.
Yeah, 8 years of experience is not enough experience, in my opinion, to talk about real statistically significant trends. But this is from Clean Technique.
Well, what they talk about major events is things like hurricanes.
Yeah, that's right. Fires, floods. And fires and floods, you're talking about major fires and major floods and
Which
major
we are
cold.
experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
In abundance.
U.S. electricity customers experienced 8 hours of power interruptions in 2020.
On average.
This is an average.
Yeah. On average, U.S. electricity customers have had just over 8 hours of electric power interruption in 2020. That's the average. The most since collecting electricity reliability data began in 2013. The high number is due to a high number of major events. Other interruptions have held steady.
Well, the notes I have, we kind of just covered it. When you exclude the major events, the average duration of interruptions was 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which happens fairly regularly.
Fairly regularly. I have been on 4 occasions in interruptions that lasted longer than a week.
Right here on Elliott Street?
No, never on Elliott Street, but across the river in Winchester twice, and then south of Boston on the coast twice.
I've had a couple of short interruptions here on Elliott Street.
They happen.
2 hours,
Yeah,
something like that.
they happen.
Well, the longer interruptions, according to my notes here, were largely because of major weather events such as hurricanes.
Yep.
So let's move along here.
Before we do, I want to mention one thing, and that is we are averaging 8 hours. In Germany, before the Energiewende started, and they started really going to renewables, they had the most reliable power grid in Europe, and they had an average of 15 minutes a year.
I can live with that.
Yeah, and when they got into the Energiewende and they started ditching their nuclear power and, you know, really putting a lot of renewables online, the outages declined by about 50%.
Now we got a nice picture coming up here of a wind farm.
A wind farm seen from above.
Let's see if I can't get that picture up.
There
it
you
is.
go.
I've seen that picture before, or one very, very much like it.
Yeah, well, we've got at a point where, you know, you show a wind turbine the next week, I don't even remember what it looked like, and it's possible that we've had that on the show
Like
before.
those shadows there.
Yeah, they remind me of when I was about 5 years old, and I realized that my shadow was longer than my father was tall, and I thought,
Well, it
this
was
is
taken
so...
either early in the morning or late in the afternoon.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. What do you got for a title?
Well, I bet if I move around here, I can find one. Financial markets may end up killing off fossil fuels before the governments do. As I've said before, it's the economics, stupid.
Yeah. An interesting email from Bloomberg Green discusses how the cost of capital is going up for fossil fuels and down for renewables. The concluding,
Supply and demand, huh?
Yeah, and well, the concluding sentence goes like this, quote, markets may end up killing off fossil fuels before governments do, end quote. Why is that? Well, let's dig into it. And the article digs into it.
It digs into it.
And you find that, for example, banks are starting to charge higher interest rates.
That's just what I got. A quick note here. I'll say
Go
pretty
ahead.
much that.
Go ahead.
Businesses borrow the money they need to finance growth.
Right.
A decade ago, the cost of capital for developing oil and gas projects and for renewable projects was pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Okay, somewhere between 8 and 10%.
Yeah.
Today, it's about 20% for a new oil project.
Ah.
But for renewables, it has dropped to somewhere between 3 and 5%. An extraordinary divergence. That's what the article
That is
said.
extraordinary.
Banks and investment firms answer only to the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
When lending to fossil fuel companies dries up, it's game over for them. And we're about at that point right now.
We are at that point, I think. Okay, should we go on, Tom? Or do you
Yeah,
have
we
more?
got another one coming up here on Friday,
is-
November the 12th, and we got a picture
Of
here.
Ursula von der Leyen.
That is Ursula von der Leyen, and she is the president of the European Commission,
That's
which
right.
is the European Union's executive arm. So she's
Right.
like
The boss.
president of United
she is
Europe.
she is El Capo.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
a draft deal calls for stronger carbon cutting targets by the end of 2022. Well, that's not bad news.
Countries are being urged to strengthen their carbon cutting goals by the end of 2022 in a draft agreement published at COP26 Glasgow Climate Summit.
And we'll be talking about that again before
We
the
sure
show is
will.
over.
And I've got some observations, by the way, on the summit that are not in any of these articles. But the document says vulnerable nations must get more help to cope with the deadly impacts of global warming.
Well, they're worried about the damage caused by extreme weather and rising seas.
The Marshall Islands, we talk about this all
In
the time.
Vanuatu,
And Vanuatu and Kiribati.
six
and-
feet above sea level.
Yeah, and places where there are cemeteries for American Marines who,
Parts of Louisiana.
yeah, parts of Louisiana, all of Florida, almost all.
Yeah.
Parts of the eastern seaboard, all the way up to Maine.
Well, keeping temperature rises to 1.5 degrees C, beyond which the worst aspects of climate change will be felt, requires global emissions to be cut by 45% by 2030 and to zero overall by 2050.
Right.
This document calls on countries to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels, but unfortunately has no firm dates or targets, so they're
Yeah.
kind of wishy-washy here.
Now, what they have agreed on here is that everybody would look at their targets and update them. They haven't,
Sort of.
They haven't said that they're going to reduce output. They're saying that
They're just going to look at it.
they're going to look at it and come up with a better promise.
Well, this reference to phasing out fossil fuels will undoubtedly be opposed by some nations, and it's happened already.
Absolutely.
At COP26, nothing is agreed on until everything is agreed on.
And I want to
That's
get
the way
into
they
that,
work.
but I want to do it on the next article.
Well, getting a consensus among so many countries is not easy.
Yes.
And they're operating by consensus.
Yep. And
Let's
so
move along here. We got another one.
We have a
coming up
picture here, and I want to say something about this picture. This article, by the way, came from CNN.
Well, let's look at the picture first.
This is
there
a
we go.
COP26 protest, and I want to tell you, this particular picture is extraordinary, because if you think about, when we were in our teens and 20s, there were a lot of protests going on about civil rights and
Yeah, there
things
were.
like that.
Yeah.
And then since that time, there's been a lot of protests about a lot of things. When you get a group of American kids or British kids getting together to protest something where they're angry and they're revved up and ready to go,
Well, this is
they
happening.
smile. They're revved
well,
up and
you
they
can't see them smiling. They're wearing masks.
Yeah, but look at their eyes. These kids are scared. They are upset. That girl in the lower right who isn't wearing a mask right, she looks like she's about to break into tears. The one in the middle who has kind of reddish light brown hair and is carrying the sign "business as usual" as a death sentence.
That's valid.
She is, yeah, but she's not a happy girl.
No, not at all.
And these kids are angry and
Well, it's
they're
their
upset,
future.
and they're scared.
You and me are going to be gone.
Absolutely. Well, you might be around. I don't think I will be. Anyway, there it is. Now, this is from CNN, and you have a title.
Young people call for fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty as delegates spar over coal, oil, and gas. By delegates, they mean the COP22.
The COP26 delegates. At the COP26 Climate Summit, a group of young climate activists gives delegates a sharp rebuke, demanding that a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty be put in place and calling out global leaders for their continued closeness with coal, oil, and gas industries. Now, the observation that I've got about this is, and Greta Thunberg was upset, and she was talking about the whole thing being
Yeah,
blah,
she's
blah, blah.
talked about it. She didn't participate at all.
No.
She kind of
However,
sat that one out.
if you look at the way the COP conferences are laid out, and you realize this is not democracy at work. This is consensus. Everybody has to agree on something, or
That's
it
what I
doesn't
just said, isn't
happen.
it?
It is.
Yeah.
And that means They're going for the lowest conceivable bar. And anybody who wants
They're
to
looking
stop
at,
things...
at something they can get consensus on.
That's right. And if they say, we're going to phase out coal, and India comes along and says, no, we're going to phase it down.
It don't happen.
It becomes, we're going to phase it down, because everybody has to agree. Now, there's one other thing I want to point out, and this might happen at the next one. If the people on Kiribati and the Marshall Islands and places like that want to do it, they can throw a monkey wrench in the whole works and just say, we're not going to agree to anything.
So far, they haven't done it.
They haven't done that, but they could say,
they could.
we're not going to agree to anything unless you people take our problems into real consideration. And if they do that, the whole thing is going to grind to a halt until they get their way. And maybe they should.
Well, activists did not mince their words when they took over the stage at the Glasgow conference.
Right.
Pointing out the absurdity of the fact that no COP agreement has ever mentioned fossil fuels.
Well, now they have. That's new. That's very hopeful.
They asked for a phase-out of all existing oil, gas, and coal production and a prohibition of any new production, calling fossil fuels, quote, our generation's weapons of mass destruction.
That's exactly right.
That's valid, really.
They're not joking about that, and they're not making something up. Okay, we should probably move on from that, unless you've got more.
We got a nice picture coming up.
We have a picture of a wind farm in Ireland, in Northern Ireland.
That's a different country.
Yeah, well, yes, it is, but it's the same island. BBC.
Yeah, something's gone wrong here.
Oh?
That's okay.
Okay.
How powering Northern Ireland has changed.
A new energy strategy for Northern Ireland is expected soon, but its electric output has already changed enormously over the past 2 decades. The country now gets 46.4% of its electricity from renewable sources.
Well, that's significant.
Sure is, mostly from wind. Developing additional technologies is important, and hydrogen is a place to start.
Well, Northern Ireland doesn't have any oil, and it doesn't have any gas, and it doesn't have any coal.
But it will have hydrogen.
But hydrogen looks like a good place to invest.
Yeah.
It's the latest technology.
And also,
we've figured out how to store it.
Yeah. And also, Ireland as a whole is good for wind.
They do have wind in Ireland. And they do have wind turbines in Ireland.
Yeah.
Onshore wind turbines.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, the gap is filled by fossil fuels.
Yes.
Okay? Northern Ireland has no gas or oil of its own to rely on. So it is vulnerability in the system. When demand is low, some wind turbines get switched off because the grid can't absorb the electricity. They're throwing the power away. And it can't be easily stored. Well, that is changing.
Yeah.
Hydrogen can be stored, and it can be generated cheaply and clearly, and this is what Belfast is doing.
Right. And one of the big advantages that hydrogen has that you don't have with lithium-ion batteries or something like that is that you can move that hydrogen from one place to another.
Well, like I just said, we figured out how to store it. So
yeah, well, we can put it in pipelines.
Put it in, and move it, put it in canisters even.
Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, we got something coming up on Saturday, November 13th.
There you go.
And we're looking at Cook Inlet, which looks like a rather pretty place.
It's very pretty, I think. And it's also...
That's Alaska, by the way.
That is Alaska. And this is from Alt Energy Mag.
It is that. Let me catch up on it here. Turning the tide for renewables in Alaska.
A highly energetic corner of the Pacific Ocean, Cook Inlet, holds one of the greatest tidal resources on Earth. All that energy has the potential to reduce Alaskans' residents' dependence on declining oil and gas production and provide excess renewable energy that could stimulate the Alaskan economy.
Well, you know, very near to us, up by Maine, is one of the other greatest tidal resources on Earth. There's something like 14-foot tides up there. And they're starting to capture that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you said that. There's an interesting picture on this link of the Peregrine Falcon, which is a ship.
Okay.
And its equipment that's designed to measure all of this stuff so that they can work on it. It's a very interesting picture. There's 2 12-foot submarine-shaped buoys that floated 60 feet below the inlet surface. Okay, and a third is on the ground, on the seafloor. And they're gathering data from the velocity, turbulence, and sediments of the nation's top-ranked energy site.
Okie dokie.
With that data, engineers will paint a detailed picture of the energy site, indicating how much energy could be generated there and how to build tidal turbines that maximize power production while minimizing impacts to the inlet's ecoservice. Now we've seen a picture of one of those turbines. It's just like a big picture, only a big turbine, only smaller.
It's like a wind turbine, but it has short blades that are very thick.
Well, the total energy in the United States has the potential to provide more than 220 terawatt hours per year of energy. Now, a terawatt's a trillion watts.
Yeah. Okay,
that's a lot of terawatt hours per year. And according to this, is enough to power 21 million homes. I don't know how they figure that out.
Well, they have a certain number of kilowatt hours per day that they say a home.
Well, the Cook Inlet site is estimated to hold as much as 18 gigawatts of total energy potential.
Yeah, and if
gigawatts is megawatts.
That's right. And if you could get, and because this is tidal energy, it's either in or it's out or it's still.
Twice a day.
And it's not still very much of the time.
No.
I mean, I used to live near the ocean, and I can remember watching things floating up the river, and then stopping, and then floating down. And the time that passes between going up the river and going down
wasn't very much.
It wasn't very much. And, you know, maybe I'm going to guess that these tidal turbines are producing significant amount of electricity, probably 20 hours a day. So you give them a battery backup, and they're.
It's a valid and useful way to collect energy.
Absolutely.
And, you know, well, we're here realizing it, but burning things to produce energy is probably the worst way to go.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah. Okay.
We got a nice picture coming up.
We have a picture of a farm. This is from Clean Technica.
How do I do that? I think
and
I do this.
This is just a picture that I went out and found. And why NASA had a picture for a farm, I don't know, but they did.
Well, it's an image of farming. Yeah, and the article is that regenerative agriculture is a way to sequester carbon.
Yeah.
And they tell us what regenerative agriculture means.
Right. Regenerative agriculture is a system of farming that seeks to rehabilitate and enhance the entire ecosystem of a farm by placing heavy premium on soil health, with attention also paid to water management and fertilizer use. Such practices will help us fight the climate crisis.
Well, some of these practices are conservation tillage,
right?
Low or no-till practices.
No-till.
Well, it's low-till or no-till.
Low-till or no-till, and I'm just repeating no-till because people should understand that some of these new practices, which are very, very productive, involve no tillage.
Another one is diversity. Okay,
diversity.
You plant beans one year, you plant clover the next.
Or you plant things together.
Or you plant them together, right?
Yeah.
Crop rotation, or rotation crops, special crops that are made for rotation. And this is a big one. Mess with it less.
I think nature was brilliant to figure out the whole business of clover being.
Yeah. Well, renew. This is 5 verbs that they come from the article. Renew, repair, reinvigorate, restore, revive.
Yeah. And when you do that, you get bigger yields, and you need less fertilizer, and you need less pesticides. And by the way,
in the long term of things, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. Okay.
It means changing the way we've always done things, but that doesn't mean we always did them the right way.
That's right. Yes.
Well, we got another picture here.
This is a picture of
supposedly Bikini Atoll, isn't it?
Yeah, and Bikini Atoll is interesting. You know, people recognize the name Bikini.
Isn't that where they dropped the bomb?
Yeah. People recognize the name Bikini.
I was wondering why. I was using the wrong mouse.
And the reason why they recognize the name Bikini is because they, you know...
Because of the bathing suit?
That's right. And the interesting thing is, I actually looked it up because it's not in the article. Bikinis were designed by a French fashion designer.
Okay.
Now, something that looks a whole lot like a bikini was already in use 2,000 years ago, but that's okay. Anyway, he designed this thing that stirred the pot of fashion a bit, and he called it a bikini because I think he knew that
it was striking, wasn't it?
This particular item this particular atoll, the thing that you're looking at, was about to be nuked. They were about to put off a bomb that would destroy what you see in this picture. So
they were trying to develop the hydrogen bomb in World War II. The atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb, yeah. But Bikini Atoll.
Bikini was one of the places where they tested it.
But after the war.
That was after the war?
That was after the war. The first tests were done, I think, in Nevada or New Mexico. I forget which. Nevertheless, this atoll, the people who lived on that beautiful beach that you see were all kind of scooped up and
They kind of moved
off.
them around, and
they moved them around, and then
put them in a city.
Blew the blazes out of the place, and it was, and I think still is, somewhat unlivable.
Well, I'll read the headline here.
Yeah.
COP26 goes into overtime as deep divisions remain over key issues around money and markets.
Right.
Just what you were talking about.
Yeah. Negotiations may run through the night on Friday. They did, and the end of the night on Saturday.
Yeah, it was supposed to end on
Friday, but it didn't. It ended late the next day. As stark divisions remain in key issues, a note from COP26 President Alok Sharma said a new draft of the agreement would likely be published around 8 a.m., which happened, and it wasn't new enough, local time on Saturday. So they had to fight through it.
Well, there was clear opposition from many countries on language concerning temperature rise and fossil fuels.
Yeah, well, as I said, we're going for the easiest stuff. Everybody has to agree, or it's not going to happen.
That's what consensus is.
And we're going to have to find a better way.
I think so.
Yeah.
All 197 parties in attendance will need to agree on each and every word of the final agreement.
Absolutely.
It ain't going to happen.
Well, it did happen.
It did, but
not on the agreement as it was. They had to change it.
They really had to play games with it.
So it's
a key analysis by Climate Change Action Tracker published this week showed that the world is on track for 2.4 degrees of warming.
And right now we're at 1.1, and look at what's going on around us.
That would mean that the risks of extreme droughts, wildfires, floods, catastrophic sea level rise, and food shortages would increase dramatically.
They'd be multiplied.
And it's been happening.
Yeah. Okay.
Sunday, November 14th.
Thank you.
And we got a picture here.
We do, and that is a graph. This is from Clean Technica, and you have a title.
Well, I guess I'll leave the graph picture up there, and I'll read the title. Solar PV and PV plus storage costs keep dropping, according to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory.
Yep, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has released its annual cost breakdown of installed solar PV and battery storage systems, and that is called U.S. Solar Photovoltaic System and Energy Storage Cost Benchmark Q1 2021. I was lucky to be able to get that out in one breath. Details installed costs for PV sections as of the first quarter of 2021, and it doesn't sound exciting in the least. And why don't you put that graph back up?
I think I can do that.
You can do that. You see that graph that's in the lower right there? That's probably the most significant, the one that says utility standalone. I'm not going to worry about the other two for reasons that I'll explain in another article. But what you're seeing there is that from 2020 until 2021, a period of 1 year, the cost of these solar plus battery systems that are going up declined by 13.14%. Now,
doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you go down at 13% per year, in 5 years, you're cutting the cost in half.
It's progress. It's technology.
And in another 5 years, it's down to a quarter.
You can't stop it.
In 5 years, it's down by a half. In another 5 years, it's down by another half, which means...
Well, from the article, costs continue to fall.
Yeah.
For residential, commercial rooftop, and utility scale PVs.
Everything.
Well, they're talking about PVs.
But, yeah, that's right. But PVs and batteries. These graphs are for PVs and batteries. The BESS.
Well, it's encouraging.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And when we see the current prices as they come up, is that in today's stuff? Yes, it is. We have our LCOE stuff on the show today.
Yeah, that's coming up.
When we see that, and you think about the fact that this is going down by 13% per year, you start realizing that anybody who's investing in anything that involves fossil fuels or nuclear
You're going to have to take a second look at it.
they should take a second look. That's exactly correct. That's the best way to put it. So, got
Got
more?
another picture coming up here.
We do indeed. And
there it is.
I want to point out that yellow thing that goes across.
Some kind of a machine.
Yeah, but I think
It's a
there's
mining machine.
It's some sort of mining machine, but that's a walkway. That yellow thing is a walkway.
Yeah.
So that's a story tall.
People are almost, they're too small to see.
Yeah, and that thing is probably 4 stories off the ground, and it's probably several stories above that. And you know, there's a machine in the background. I don't know if you see it, but it kind of breaks through the horizon. And I would bet that thing is 25 stories tall. These things are gigantic. And what are they for? They are for harvesting lignite.
Which we don't even do in this country.
Yeah, but they do there. And
lignite, we got hard coal, anthracite. We got soft coal, which mostly we use here.
Yeah.
And lignite is like almost coal.
It's almost coal. That's right. That's right. It is dirty. It's
one of the dirtiest fuels you can get.
And it's got a low energy content, which means that if you're going to use it, you're probably going to have
use a lot of
a
it.
train track running from the mine less than 20 miles, more like 5 miles or less to the place where it's used.
It's not an efficient fuel.
It's no. Okay, what do we got for...
That's Germany. That's what they got.
Well, they're closing them down, though. What do you have for title? This is from
COP22
CNN.
climate deal includes a historic reference to fossil fuels, but it doesn't meet the urgency of the crisis.
Well, we're going for the low bar, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Nearly 200 nations reached a climate agreement at COP26. It references the role of fossil fuels in the climate crisis for the first time ever. India made an 11th hour objection, however, that watered down the language about reducing the use of coal instead of eliminating it.
Well, the COP process has tried and failed for years to include an acknowledgement that the climate crisis has been caused by the burning of fossil fuels.
Right.
Okay. Despite that progress, this text doesn't reflect the urgency expressed by scientists. Rather, it defers more action on reducing fossil fuel emissions to next year. And just as you said, they couldn't come up with consensus.
Yeah, but it does remind me of the fact, which we just reported in, I think, last week's show or the week before, that the heads of various oil companies said, yeah, well, climate change is going on and our products do contribute to that. But it ain't our fault, you know. So I think we're seeing a corner turned. I just hope it's quick enough.
Well, there is a little bit of language on coal, so that's a start.
Yes, they actually mention coal by name. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, we got another picture here.
We have a graph.
See if I can't find it. Hey, it found itself.
It found itself. And this
That's
is
atmospheric carbon dioxide and the Earth's surface temperature.
Right, and
for
this is
100 years.
Yeah, this is from the BBC. It would be more impressive, I think, if they looked at the temperature of the surface of the ocean. But let's go ahead.
Well, it started in 1880 because that's when they started recording this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it starts in 1880.
And
you can see that since 1940, it's done nothing but go up.
Yeah. And basically, the bar there, everything above is red, everything below is blue. That bar is the average temperature for the 20th century.
Well, if you notice in 1940, it goes up.
Yeah, there's a war.
That was the war.
Yeah.
Yep.
War going on.
And I think in 1960 there, 1957, that's Vietnam.
Might be, yeah. Okay, you have a title.
What is COP26 and what has been agreed at the Glasgow Climate Conference?
Extreme weather events linked to climate change, and by the way, they are actually linked now, are intensifying. The past decade was the warmest on record, and governments agree urgent collective action is needed. Of course, conservatives are very upset about the idea that the action would be collective. COP26 is the latest of a series of meetings about what to do about it, and here are some of the things that it agreed on. So,
well, we'll touch base on that, but I've been a little bit confused about just COP26.
Yeah.
So I'm going to explain a little bit of what it is for our
Please
audience
do.
here.
I'm sure everybody will.
Well, COP stands for the Conference of the Parties.
Which means they're having a bunch of parties here.
Oh, yes. And this has been the 26th annual summit.
That's a lot of parties.
25,000 delegates attended. It was really something like 24,700.
Not counting the people who were there, the 500 people who were there as lobbyists for the...
Well, that's something else again. They're part of those delegates.
Okay.
Okay, for COP26, 200 countries were asked for their plans to cut emissions by 2030. That was part of the deal.
Yeah.
Well, under the Paris Agreement of 2015, countries were asked to make changes to keep global warming well below 2 degrees C and to aim for 1.5. The goal is to keep cutting emissions until they reach net zero in 2050.
You know, this is the current goal, but the fact is, cutting emissions till you reach net zero leaves us with an atmosphere full of carbon dioxide.
It does.
And that carbon dioxide is going to keep heating the Earth.
Well, they got an answer for that, a very expensive way of enhancing our bottom line by taking carbon out of the air.
Yeah, I have a cheap way.
Stop burning things.
Well, you have to do that, but I'm saying you start producing peat bogs and
Things
what we
like
saw
forests,
earlier,
peat bogs,
the marshland that we saw earlier, that stuff will draw down. A peat bog will draw down something like 17 times as much carbon out of the atmosphere as a forest of the same size.
And a forest draws down a lot.
Yeah. Okay, do we go on from here?
Well, real quick one. What's been agreed at COP26? And the pact asked countries to republish their climate action plans by the end of next year. So they're going to have to take a look at what nonsense it is they've been spewing.
Yeah. Well, they do this every year. But
Yeah.
as I said, I think these little islands in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and so forth should put their foot on the...
They're scared.
And just say, look, if you people aren't going to deal with us, we're not going to agree with anything, and you're going to have to go home and tell your people why it is that no agreement was arrived at. And it's not because of us, it's because of you. Because you haven't left us in a position where we are allowed to stay alive. So, I'm changing it. Pictures.
Let's
too
move
fast.
along here. We've got
We want to
another
move
picture
along. We've
coming
got
up
another demonstration, and we've got
That's what it calls.
an
That's
item
what it's
from
called, a demonstration.
It
They
is.
got a big sign there that says blah blah blah.
That's right. And
But
this
you missed the small point. It says no more blah blah blah.
oh yes, that's true. This is from CNN.
I think it is. Now I guess we're going to look at these guys, and I am going to read what it says here. COP26 ended with a Glasgow Climate Pact. Here's where it succeeded and failed.
Okay, nearly 200 countries adopted the Glasgow Climate Pact at COP26 talks after wrangling for nearly 2 weeks. The pact will not get us to the goal we need to reach, but in some important ways, the talks were successful in moving us forward. And here's some major points, and I'll bet you can make some.
Well, the agreement makes unprecedented motion of the rule of fossil fuels in the climate crisis.
Right.
Okay, unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
It calls for phasing down of unabated coal and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. You have to explain what unabated means.
Unabated means you're just charging ahead.
Well, look, you haven't done anything to offset the effects
you're
of your
just
coal. You're
doing
doing it.
Yeah.
The language was originally stronger, but was watered down several times. However, a signal has been sent that the era of coal is ending.
It is ending.
And I think anybody who's got eyes to see and ears to hear is aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, our next picture is a microburst.
It is that. Let's get a picture of a microburst
from
up there.
NOAA. And I'm going to have to explain what a microburst is. This came
Well,
from
there it is.
BBC.
There's a picture of it.
Well, yeah, basically what happens is...
It's a very short, intense thunder shower.
It's a little bit more than that. What happens is the cold air that's in a place in the atmosphere suddenly crashes. So that part of the atmosphere has
Is going down.
Very, very powerful
Fast.
downdraft.
Yep.
And unlike a tornado where the stuff is going up, this has winds going out in all directions, but they go straight out. Where in a tornado they're wound around each other. And
So this is not the place to be.
no. Those winds are like 150 miles an hour.
You don't want to be.
You don't want to be anywhere near this. So it's basically like it's the reverse of a tornado. And the reason why I chose this particular photograph was because I couldn't find one that, really expressed what this article does, but this particular photograph is a photograph of disruption.
I guess.
Yeah. So what do you got for a title?
Climate deal sounds the death knell for coal power. Huh?
Huh? The Glasgow climate deal was, quote, a game-changing agreement, end quote, which sounds, quote, the death knell for coal power, end quote. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. Well, of course, Boris Johnson is going to say almost anything that he thinks I shouldn't say that. I was going to say benefit.
Where do you get a name like Boris? He sounds like he's the bad guy in a vampire movie.
In a Rocky and Bullwinkle show.
I've never seen that. So
you never saw it? Boris and Natasha were the spies. That, although countries only agreed to quote phase down, end quote, rather than quote phase out, end quote, coal.
Well, they're not going to have much choice.
Coal is already too expensive. Why?
Exactly. Bingo.
This is a change that India insisted on.
Well, India uses a lot of coal.
Yeah, he said this was a fantastic achievement. The Indians want to have leeway to increase coal if that's what they need to do. The Chinese want to do the same thing.
Well, they have coal.
They have a lot of coal.
Yeah.
And the Chinese are the same way.
Have a lot of coal,
The
too.
Chinese the Indians said, I object, and the Chinese said, come to think of it, we do too. And so, anyway.
Well, this remains the first time plans to reduce coal have been mentioned in a climate deal.
Yeah.
And the agreement was reached after the 2-week Glasgow COP26 summit went into overtime on Saturday.
Right.
So Boris said he thought the watered-down language on coal did not make much of a difference. Well, he's smoking the wrong kind of cigarettes.
Well,
he said that most of Western Europe and North America has been persuaded to pull the plug on financial support for overseas fossil fuel projects.
I think he's right about that part of it.
Well, it's the economy, stupid.
That's right.
It isn't politics. One of the main goals set out by COP26 was to ensure global warming does not go above 1.5 C by 2100.
Right.
And at the current rate, the world is heading for 2.4 C by that date.
This is a disaster.
That we can't have.
Yeah, it would be like that, Hurricane Irene coming around every third year or something. It's just, we cannot do that. Okay.
Well, this is an interesting picture that I'm going to...
It is. It's very interesting. This is from WPRL.
We've talked about this before.
We've talked about it a bunch of times.
This specific farm we've talked about.
Oh, okay. Yes, we have, in fact.
Now,
You're
what
right.
did I do to make this thing disappear? I think... There we go.
You got to get the...
Well, I was talking about my computer.
Aha.
I still should put the picture up.
It might be a good idea. I think people would much rather see this than me.
Well, I'm working with two mice and two computers here.
I came to the conclusion that many people look a lot better with a mask off. I think I might look better with one on. Anyway, this is from WPRL. What do you got for a title?
This Colorado solar garden, and it's in quotes, is literally a farm under solar panels. Now, we've talked about this particular farm in the past.
Yep. A solar garden, Colorado solar garden, is growing vegetables with the help of researchers from nearby Colorado State University and the National Renewable Energy Lab, which, by the way, has a big campus in Colorado. They had been studying how to turn all the otherwise unused land beneath solar panels into a place to grow food. And here you see it. This is, I believe, that right-hand row. It looks like it might be rainbow chard. The middle one looks like it might be, I don't know, it looks like another kind of chard, Swiss chard.
I'll touch base on that in a second.
Go ahead.
Well, the guy the guy that owns this farm, his name is Kominek.
Yeah.
And we've talked
about him
and about his farm here.
Yep.
And he's got a farm near Boulder, Colorado, and they were barely making money for 50 years.
Right.
And finally, the owner installed 3,200 solar panels. I don't know where he got the money for that. That's a lot of solar panels.
His kids probably saved up their allowance.
Well, they were mounted on posts 8 feet above what used to be an alfalfa field. So he knew what he was doing. He put these things up in the air.
Yeah.
Solar panels and farming can literally coexist and can even help one another.
Yeah.
The solar panels are spaced far enough apart to drive a tractor between them.
Right.
Duh. The shade, this is the interesting part. The shade from the panels actually helps the plants thrive.
Yeah, because
The
they don't get
intermittent
burned.
shade also means less evaporation of irrigation water.
Yeah.
And in turn, the evaporation actually keeps the panels cooler. It's a win-win situation.
Right.
Locomotive is currently growing peppers, tomatoes, squash, pumpkins, lettuce, beets, turnips, carrots, and kale.
I think
That's what he's growing right now.
Yeah.
Researchers say there needs to be financial incentives for family farmers to add solar to their portfolio if solar gardens like Byron Comenics are really going to take off and become mainstream.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Well, it's not intuitive.
No, it's not. That's
It's
the
not.
problem. But it's not. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Instead of getting one stream of
Revenue.
profit revenue, you're getting two.
That's right. We're up to Tuesday, November 16th, and
Time flies when you're having fun.
we have a picture that's already up. You
Oh,
don't have to
yeah,
do
let's
anything.
put that picture
of a
up.
battery electric freight locomotive.
Well, it
and-
doesn't exist yet, so that's a myth.
Well, they're building it.
Yeah, but it
clean
won't be ready
technical.
for 3 years.
Well, actually, that thing that you're looking at there might actually be a photograph of the shell.
Oh, it most likely, it probably has a diesel engine in it. That particular picture.
Well, maybe.
But they just take the diesel engine out and they put in a whole bunch of batteries.
Okay, this is, what do you have for the title?
Electrification of the rail industry takes just one, giant step forward.
Everybody knows that transportation by freight rail is fuel efficient. The missing link for sustainability is full electrification. Now we can see some hope in the form of a 100% electric locomotive soon to ply the rails of the Canadian Railway Company, CN. Now, there are plenty of electric locomotives that take electricity from overhead lines.
Yeah, but they're mostly used for passengers. For people.
And they're only used where you've got overhead lines.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is something that is new. It means that you can run the trains where there aren't any
Where there
overhead.
aren't these lines.
Yep.
Where diesel, you traditionally use diesel, except
Right.
diesel you can't use underground. These things you can. You can drive them right into a city.
Yeah, you could drive this into a city. And in
So the
fact,
Association of American Railroads estimates that using rail for just 25% of long-haul truck trips would reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. by about 13 million tons a year.
Right.
That's significant.
it is.
A single freight train can replace several hundred trucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? Shifting freight from trucks to rails also reduces highway wear and tear and the pressure to build new highways.
Yep,
So this is a win-win
It is.
situation.
it is.
Nobody wants to talk about the trail of microparticles of the tire material and the road surface it leaves behind, which is it a pollutant,
Right.
okay? And nobody wants to, well, I read that one. These microparticles are actually a big deal for the tire industry, which is trying to figure out how to keep them from contributing to global pollution.
Okay, we are behind schedule, Tom, and we have
Are
an
we?
item here from Yahoo.
Well, let's catch up here with
Yes,
a
let's
picture
do
of
that.
charging an electric car. And it is from Yahoo, and it's Ford and Purdue University created a cable that will fully charge an EV in 5 minutes. That blows my mind.
Yeah, Ford has teamed up with Purdue University to build a prototype of a cable that could fully charge an EV's batteries in just 5 minutes.
This is kind of a very special
without
cable.
overheating. That's the big
That's the
catch.
big point.
It could help overcome one of the last major obstacles standing in the way of EVs achieving mass acceptance. Now, this 5-minute charge thing is a big step, but the cables have got to be able to do
I'll put
this.
some numbers here, and it blows my mind.
Okay, go ahead.
This new cable could handle up to 2,400 amps. That sounds unbelievable.
What is 1 amp?
1 amp.
I know, but all right, let's.
It's not very much.
It's not very much, but how many?
A typical circuit breaker at a house is 20 amps.
20 amps.
And that's usually doing half of a house or a quarter
yeah,
of a house.
and how many amps does it take to run a toaster? Do you think maybe 2?
That's probably one of the higher things that you use.
Yeah.
It probably takes 2-3 amps.
Right. So what we're talking about here is how many amps?
Well, they're talking about 520 amps. Oh, they're talking about 2,400 amps.
So we're talking
The
about
best
12
charger you can buy today will handle 520 amps.
We're talking about 1,200 toasters all going at once. And this thing can power them without overheating.
Well, I read a little bit about the cable, and this is something very, very, very different to me.
Yeah.
It's a liquid-cooled cable.
Okay. Listen, we've got to move on, Tom. We have an item here from the Burlington Free Press, unless you've got something important about that. There is a picture of a solar array.
Well, it just says that 2,400 amps would result in charging 4 times faster.
Yeah.
One of the drawbacks in the adoption of electric vehicles is they take too long to charge.
We've got a picture of a solar array there
We
at the
certainly
Jericho landfill, which is in Vermont.
That is
the
that's
article
about half the size of the one that's in Brattleboro.
in Brattleboro.
Now let's see, I'm using the wrong mouse.
There you
here.
go. Tom has the unfortunate problem of having to deal with 2 mice.
Well, let's take a look at that one. Now the one we have here in Brattleboro is about twice that size.
Twice that size. So what do you got for a title?
I gotta move. Which one am I? Which one? Here we go. Jericho's 2 new solar plants will generate enough power for 7,800 Vermont homes.
Right.
And this is one of the 2.
One of the 2. 2 utility-sized solar plants have come online in Jericho, Vermont, topping a former gravel pit and a closed-down landfill. They are expected to generate enough electricity for 7,800 homes. Which
I think it's supposed to be 780.
According to the developer, Encore Renewable Energy. Now, Tom, do you have anything important about that?
Well, the arrays have a cumulative capacity. That's 2 arrays of 4.4 megawatts.
Which is a
and
little
right
bit...
here we got 5.
That's right, yeah. Okay, our next item is important, and it came out on Wednesday, November 17th.
Yeah, let's get this
and
one
we
up
have
there.
we have a
spend a little
graph
time
there.
looking at it.
Yeah, this particular graph, well, this item came from Clean Technica, so why don't you read the title for it, and I'll...
Utility scale solar reaches an LCOE, which I will explain, range of 2.8 cents to 4.1 cents per kilowatt hour in the USA, which is a record low.
Yeah.
And by the way, the LCOE is a levelized cost of energy.
Yes.
It's the measure of the cost of electricity for a generating plant over its lifetime.
Right.
So it's an estimate. It's the ratio between the estimated cost over the lifetime of the generating plant divided by the estimated sum of the energy amount.
Okay.
So they take the cost, they take the energy, all of this is estimates, and they come up
Yeah.
with a levelized cost of energy, which is what we're talking about here.
Okay. Utility scale solar has reached another record in levelized cost of energy at 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour to 4.1 cents per kilowatt hour, according to Lazard's latest LCOE report, version 15. Lazard found...
That's getting pretty cheap.
Yeah, it is. Lazard found that renewables are increasingly outcompeting other forms of energy. Now, I want to point out, when you're looking at this chart that's on the screen, could you put that up again?
Yep.
The renewable energy is in blue, and conventional energy is in black. The cheapest form of conventional energy
It's coal.
is gas,
Oh,
combined cycle natural gas, which is at the very, very bottom. Above that is coal, above that is nuclear, above that is peaking plants. There's a lot that's left out, but the combined cycle natural gas is from $45 to $74 per megawatt hour. Now, if you compare that with the fourth and fifth items and the last item that are in blue, you'll see that they are
Light blue.
In the light blue. They are, starting at like $26 per megawatt hour, which is 2.6 cents, and going up. And some of them, solar power is going to be almost always cheaper than any form of conventional power. Now, the one thing that I want to point out here is that it looks like
It's pretty cheap too.
solar PVs that are rooftop mounted on residential is the most expensive.
Is it really?
Well, that's what it shows in the graph.
Okay.
But it's not a fair comparison. because these other everything except for the solar rooftop and community solar, the top three, those really offset retail sales of electricity, where the rest of them are all compared to wholesale.
So that's kind of confusing.
It's a little confusing. Don't get to thinking that rooftop solar is too expensive on the basis of this.
Well, there's a takeaway from the article. The cost of offshore wind and utility-scale solar continues to be competitive with the cost of coal,
Yeah.
nuclear, and combined cycle gas. So it's competitive with all three.
Yeah.
This means that they are not just cheaper than new-build fossil plants, but they're also cost competitive with simply operating existing fossil plants.
That's right. And when you look at that solar plus battery that we were looking at earlier,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's declining at 13% per year, you see that these other types of energy are just not going to be able to survive 5 years from now.
Let's take a look at nuclear. We've been looking at nuclear plants and they're just not getting built.
Okay, speaking of which, maybe we should go to the next article.
Why should we do a thing like that?
Well, because it has a picture of the San Onofre
how do
nuclear plant.
How do I move it?
You're getting
Hold on.
You
hold
don't
on.
need to. It's up now.
I'm trying to get it here.
Oh, you're trying to get your article.
That's the San Onofre nuclear plant. And
That's
by the
right.
way, for a piece of trivia here, San Onofre is St. Humphrey.
Okay. Thank you. Those reactors, by the way, are not operating
I was going to say that. It was shut down in 2013.
because of an engineering failure.
Well, the steam generators failed.
The steam generators failed because they were not engineered properly.
Bingo. It is currently in the process of decommissioning.
Yeah.
So
What do
they're
you have-
taking it apart right now.
What do you have for a title for this?
Nuclear power won't save the world. It won't even help.
Putting money into nuclear power goes beyond being a huge waste. It detracts from the vital issue of dealing with climate change now by making money unavailable for dealing with the problem using less expensive, more flexible energy that can be built much more quickly.
Yeah.
And that's what it says.
This is a very good article to read.
Thank you.
You wrote it.
I wrote it.
It is a good article. I read
Yeah.
it and I read it again. There's a lot of good stuff in that.
I feel flattered.
Well, it starts out by saying it's an old paradigm, and a paradigm is a way of looking at something, a model.
Yeah.
Okay? And the electricity most of us use comes from a system that was designed mostly over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It started with baseload power plants with transmission lines carrying electricity to towns and cities where customers lived.
Yeah.
And what's happening now, you didn't say it there, but it's distributed power. They're popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And they won't be having these transmission lines any longer.
Now, I want to go to the next article. We can't really discuss it because we don't have time.
Well, we have no time to wait, we have no time to lose, and that's
Yeah.
not talking about our show.
This is that was this is from the Guardian. What's the title?
Germany suspends approval for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline.
Yeah, Germany.
Now, that's not the Nord Stream gas pipeline.
That
but,
pipeline
is a pipeline.
is in Central Asia.
I'm going to pull
I forget
that,
what.
I'm going to
what
pull that
country
picture
it is.
up
That's
if
a
I
good
can.
idea.
This is what we're looking at, but it's not the one we're talking about.
Germany suspended approval process for a conventional Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which would double its reliance on Russian gas following growing geopolitical pressure to scrap the project. It is a big setback to the Kremlin-backed Gazprom plans to extend Russian gas dominance.
Well, this is a lot about politics.
It's about politics. It really is.
Nord Stream 2, the pipeline we're talking about, it would bypass existing pipelines that run through Ukraine and Belarus. So they're taking revenue away from these guys.
Yeah.
And the pipeline itself would go under the Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
From Western Russia, near Estonia, to the German grid north of Berlin.
Yeah.
So it's cutting out all these other countries.
But another thing is, it is increasing dependence of Germany on Russia, and
they don't want that.
And yeah, Vladimir Putin has shown himself to be using energy as a tool for bullying people, and they just don't want to be bullied. And they know that if they double his strength, he's going to double his use of it. So there you go. Anyway, we have come to the last of our...
This is our last. This is the last one, yeah.
We are telling everybody to have a thrilling week. thrillingly easy
Thrillingly
week.
easy week.
That's right. Why don't you put us up and we can wave goodbye?
Well, let's see if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I'll bet you know how to do it.
I know how, but my hand doesn't know.
Come back next time.